Thank
Okay,
you. Please go ahead. Beg your pardon.
no problems at all. I'm just gonna say, got it. So basically, anyway, I wanted to tell the book is a very positive story of my transition and how I became a better person as a result of being my true self. And my story is told in quite considerable detail within the book. There's some pretty awful parts of it, and some very sad parts, some very emotional parts, and I hope some funny parts as well. So I could talk about the book all night. I could read the book all night, but I know you've got a couple more questions for me.
Yeah, yeah. No, so that's that. Yeah, that's a nice kind of introduction to the the thought process behind it, and it's quite safe to say that it exactly covers all the emotions that come with everything, the brilliant road and pathway you've been on. But I guess one of the key messages that shines through in the memoir, and I guess we all have experience in this, maybe you can elaborate a bit more, is the navigating of family and love, as we all do as humans. And perhaps you could tell us a little bit more around that, the strength of your family and how you, in your own words, when we had a chat recently, you view the book as a love story between yourself, Helen, your wife, and Jenny, your daughter, but that it's also a love letter to your mum, and that journey of ups and downs, because again, we all know about our Irish mammies, and the love-hate relationship. We've all been there. I certainly have had that, but I think that theme that runs through and permeates around it. Could you just give us a little bit of your of that, and what that means to you? Because it's quite a powerful statement to say it's a love story between you and Helen and Jenny, but then also underneath that was this love letter to your mother.
Well, relationships for anybody transitioning, relationships and family relationships in particular are so important. And for me, I couldn't have transitioned without the support of Helen and Jenny. And I'll talk about a little bit about a passage in the book whereby I had been out at a meeting, and this was before I transitioned. So I was very androgynous is a word that isn't really used anymore in relation to us, but it's appropriate here, where my clothes and my mannerisms were becoming more and more feminine as I carried on my journey. And my daughter Jenny had begun to see the changes in me, and she questioned Helen as to why I was changing. So when I got home that evening, Jenny was going to bed. She was 12 at this stage, and she was going to bed. And we said to her, "Listen, we've got something to tell you." And Helen and I sat her down on the couch and explained to her what I was going through. Okay, she cried. We all cried. We hugged each other, and she settled down, and she was going up the stairs, and she turned around and she said to me one of the most powerful statements that anybody could say, which was utter acceptance. And she said, "You've got to be true to yourself." Now you imagine that, and every time I say that statement, I get emotional.
Yeah.
And you imagine that from a 12-year-old who's
I was going to ask what age was she at that time?
Yeah, she was 12, and a 12-year-old with all the issues that being 12 entails, going to secondary school and puberty and everything. She had such deep love that she could accept me for that, and I wish everybody else in my circle of friends and family could have done that. Helen was amazing. The book just describes our relationship as we became romantically involved, and then I divulged to her my deep dark secret about who I truly was inside. And it was a case of I got great acceptance from Helen. Certainly, ultimately, I did. It was a very difficult situation, as you might imagine, her husband turning into her wife, essentially. Um, but then, Michael, you mentioned about my mother, and my
Mm,
mother was someone who was a typical, as you mentioned, as you said, Irish mammy. So I grew up in the 1970s with her. I was born in 1961, but I grew up in the 1970s with Ireland being a very Catholic and, dare I say, regressive society.
mm.
No information about anything like this. And I started exploring my gender identity at that time in the early 1970s. And as time went on, certainly from about the year 2000 on, so I was 40-ish at that stage, and I started to exhibit feminine traits and wear more feminine clothes and so on. And at one point, my mother said to me, "Well, I want you to stop looking so feminine. It makes you look like a woman." And I took that opportunity to come out to her and explain to her what I was going through. Very, very difficult situation. And it took her a long, long time. And we're talking perhaps 8, 10 years to really even partially accept me. Um, but we had such an amazing relationship growing up, my mother and I, that,
Yeah, I was going to ask you kind of how, how was
yeah,
that with your mum? Because, it said, we've all been there, sneaking in after a night out, and your mum's sort of shielding you, or then she'll also, give out when she wants more than your dad might. And so and then, just that general, connection with with a mother. So,
yeah.
um,
Well, I was very much my mother's child, and I very much appreciated her insights and her love and her attention to detail. One of the I always say that one of the reasons, and this is in jest, of course, one of the reasons that I transitioned was because of the smell of my mother's nail polish. And indeed, the book cover shows a bottle of nail polish. And it was my daughter Jenny who suggested the book cover because the smell of it just was so feminine. It meant so much, and it reminded me of my mother so much that it was so appropriate for the cover of the book. And yeah, the relationship with my mother had to change. She couldn't accept me. She was a person. She was a person of her generation.
yeah, because that's
Where,
something
yeah,
you'd mentioned to me that, and I guess that's a topic, as we're now in 2022 versus, you're going back a generation, that you
mm,
felt that, for a lot of people inside, it was to be a generational thing, and that, it was so far removed from normal society.
mm.
So that sense of disappointment you felt was palpable, the unacceptance, because I guess societal, ways at that time, it just was so unconventional of acceptance.
Well, it was. I mean, homosexuality was only decriminalized in 1993, which is relatively recently. So in the 1970s, anybody who was different, anybody who was gay or lesbian, well, I mean, lesbians weren't even thought of in society. Nobody believed that they really existed um, in society's mind. And as for trans people, that was just something that was totally outside the pale as regards most people's thoughts. So there was no information or anything in the 1970s. And as time went on and information became available, I mean, for me, the life changing event was the advent of the internet, where I could talk to people online and discover information and discover the possibilities of progressing on the route of transition to being my true self. So there, all this, however, with my mother was just something that she couldn't cope with. And despite the fact that I urged her to believe me when I said that I had been dressing since I was in my sister's clothes or her clothes since I was 10 or 11, she wouldn't believe it. She said she would have known. And I said, well, you didn't, because I was very careful. It was a very sad situation, Michael. I would have loved her to fully accept me. And I would have also loved to have shown myself to my father, who died in 2000, just at the very beginning of my transition.
Okay, so having gone through that sort of tug of war of love and acceptance, what is wonderful from that period of you looking at yourself and becoming you and saying, I'm Philippa, and it's clear in some ways that's energized you to look at the wider picture, right, and the community, and your work in that. So was the thought process of getting so active and involved referred back from that particular starting point that you said, not only will I be Philippa, but I will share this with other people. So you might tell us how you kind of decided to use this to for looking at your work, your career, and the community that you've been involved in.
Yeah, well, Michael, when I joined the civil service in 1980, it was a very conservative place. So my transition involved me being very, very careful. But I realized that I was in a privileged position because a lot of trans people don't have employment in the trans community is very poor. There's a lot of hate crimes and there's a lot of negativity around being trans. So to raise your head above the parapet really is a risk. But I felt privileged because I had the support of Helen and I had the support of friends in work, and then I had the wider LGBTQ community. So with that sense of privilege, I felt that I really should give something back. And
I love that sense of where you say that it can be difficult to show general society and that transgender people are ordinary people, and with a particular element of our being that we need to explore and portray. So that sense of you being Philippa and being able to introduce that to cis people, and not being any different or any better or any worse to trans, it just seems very insightful. That's the way you've been able to approach it.
Well, I'm glad that comes across, Michael, because it is important that people see that trans people are ordinary human beings with all the hobbies and all the worries and all the things that everybody else has. And we have this huge, huge situation where we need to be true to ourselves. And sometimes society or families or work can't allow us to be ourselves. So that's why I became involved with the likes of Transgender Equality Network Ireland. I was there at the very beginning, pretty much, and Transgender Europe. In a way, it was selfish as well, though, Michael, because both of these organizations allowed me the possibility, especially Transgender Europe. When I joined the committee there, suddenly I was going to Europe on a regular basis for meetings and for events. And I was going as Philippa, even though I hadn't changed my name, even though I hadn't had any medical treatment. It all helped in my transition. So not only was I giving to the community and giving to my friends and colleagues, I was also receiving. something. And that helped my transition immensely.
So, with that energy to bring that, that message, I know the pride events and everything that's around that, and something you've talked about a lot is that it's just not all about pride, only this time of year, but also the phenomenon of corporate pride. And so within the day-to-day of people, but then, as you said, the business world, and you some thoughts around, looking at that, whether it's discrimination, whether it's a barrier, an obstacle, that you have to sidestep or tackle straight on. Could you just maybe give us a little bit on that, because I know that's very obviously a huge passion of yours.
Well, indeed, and as you saw from my bio, I'm a director of Dublin Pride itself. In fact, I'm now co-chair. I was elected last night, which was quite an amazing honour. So Dublin Pride and the Pride, all the events of Pride around the country and indeed around the world during the month of June are both a protest and a party. But Pride started in 1969 at the Stonewall bar in New York, which I had the pleasure of going to a few years back. And it was a protest. It was a drag queen who threw the first bottle through the window because the police were arresting gay and lesbian and trans people in the vicinity, in the bar and around the area. And finally, the drag queens said, okay, that's it, we've had enough, and started causing trouble. And so it was a protest for their rights, for the rights of the rainbow community, as I like to call it. It was, as time went on, it became more of a party and less of a protest, because the LGBTQ community were getting rights. They were getting the right to freely assemble. Homosexuality here was decriminalized in 1993. Eventually, we got the right to first of all civil partnership, and then marriage, and then allied to that for women's rights and feminism is repeal the 8th. So there was a progression there that Pride was becoming more of a party than a protest, because it looked like we were getting everything that we wanted. That's not true, however. And the corporate side just want the party side. They don't want the protest at all. But Pride is at its core a protest, and it's necessary to remember that. And
I mean, is there a conflict of interest there? Because I was observing Pride. I've been to many, and little by little you'll see, like every corporate movement, if there's you see the floats, you'll see the sponsorship, which is wonderful. But yeah, exactly, getting back to that, the core fundamentals of it, if there's a clash, it can happen.
There is a clash, and there's a split in the community worldwide between that protest aspect or the party aspect. So it is something, and we encourage in Under the Rainbow, the diversity and inclusion company that I'm a director of, we encourage the corporates to continue the training and the talks that we give them all through the year, and not just deal with LGBTQ issues around June, but there's plenty of other events during the year for that community, and they can celebrate those as well, and give their staff and management training in wider diversity and inclusion, which is a very hot topic at the moment, and all the companies want to kind of get people like Under the Rainbow in to talk to them, and then as far as they're concerned, they've done their diversity and inclusion training. That's not the case. It needs to be embedded through constant workshops and policies and strategies. All that has to be done. So the pinkwashing, as it's called, of pride by the corporate sector is something that we try to discourage, to encourage them to do, not to talk about and educate their staff and colleagues all through the year.
Yeah, and I guess another topic around like the fact that we're now, I mean, okay, we're virtual tonight, but we will hopefully have an opportunity to meet in person with everybody that's here, and at a humanist event, and on the event itself and the demographic and the tribes and the different types of people. I mean, in Humanism Ireland, we've many different people from different backgrounds, and so do you make a conscious effort to look at everybody that takes an interest in the community, and the younger generation right through to the older? Do you try to make sure that you're capturing that captive audience, and is it a key focus within the structure of the organization? Because it's something that we at Humanism Ireland are very focused on in ensuring we see more awareness of humanism. So perhaps you could give us some tips on that. Quite welcome to hear, because it's clear that you do see the young and the old embracing the community.
Absolutely. The young people of today, God, I sound very old, but the young people of today.
I'm not looking at Dara now, as you
No,
said that.
I'm not either. I mean, I'm constantly amazed at the eloquence and the intelligence exhibited by the young people of today. My own daughter is 27, and she could write rings around me. She could argue black is white, and I'd believe her by the end of the conversation. And looking at the young members of my community, the LGBTQ community, it just gives me hope for the future. It's just absolutely amazing. They're one element of the rainbow community, and what we have to remember is that there is also an intersectionality that needs to be taken stock of, where intersectionality would be, say, if you have a disabled person who's also gay, or somebody with mental health issues who's also lesbian. So there's intersectionalities there. So it's difficult to cope and to account for everybody's particular issue within Pride, but we do our best to accommodate everybody, and there will always be, say, an Irish Sign Language interpreter there, usually 2 or 3, in fact, to give themselves breaks. And it's a case of we try to include everybody within the community in the Pride Parade. There's no entrance fee or anything like that, so anybody can join as long as they're respectful and embrace our values. Essentially, we don't make them sign up to anything, but obviously we don't want any naysayers or racists or homophobes or transphobes to be marching with us and shouting abuse and so on, as has happened, unfortunately, all too frequently. And that, in fact, raises an issue with the horrible murders in Sligo and many, many attacks here in Dublin and around the country, in fact, which, okay, haven't resulted in deaths, but have resulted in horrific injuries. So Pride is both a protest and a parade and a party, and we do our best to cater for everybody. But at the end of the day, it's a difficult situation to some of the more radical groups will, for instance, come along and counter protest. It is a party. It's a great occasion. And Michael, you said you'd been a few times. One of the most important moments for me was when I was with my daughter in about 2005, before I fully transitioned, and we went to the Pride Parade, and I stood on the sidelines of the parade. I didn't have the nerve, I didn't have the courage to join the parade at that point. But I listened to the common folk, the ordinary people of Dublin, and there wasn't one negative comment about the parade. It made such an impact on me that was my community, that I couldn't actually join because I didn't want my daughter to realize at that stage, she was only 10 at that stage. But that was my community marching, and the people of Dublin were accepting it.
And what was it like? You remember that feeling of effect, the first time you stepped in to it? What was that feeling?
The first time that I joined the parade, I was a steward. It was torrential rain. I was in a very light rain jacket, and it wasn't. We still had a party, but my God, it wasn't the best. It wasn't the best experience. I think the following year was the best experience, where although I was a steward again, the sun was beating down, and it was wonderful. But certainly being with my family, essentially, the 60,000 members of my family, was just incredible.
Yeah, no, I can testify to, and I'm sure this year, after all we've been through, is going to be quite a spectacle. But listen, I know we've talked a lot around I guess, the memoir and your passion from the work perspective, and your activity and management of Pride. But there's one other area that spiked my own interest, and you probably have a sense of this. I mean, I said I have a keen interest in sport, and I represented Ireland in swimming in sort of European and world master events, and I'm actually going to Rome end of August for a swimming event, and I teach open water swimming as a little hobby for people who want to learn. But I think I've been outshone here when I look at your cycling credentials, and that you represented and founder of Sporting Pride, and not only that, you went to the Paris Gay Games 2018, and better than I've ever done at any of my events, you won a few medals. So that's a pretty impressive achievement. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that interest in Sporting Pride and the support of the LGBTQI athletes in sport.
I saw an ad in the Gay Community News back in early 2018, which talked about setting up an Irish team to go to the World Gay Games, which are held every 4 years. They're called unofficially the Gay Olympics, but the Olympics threaten them with legal action, so they can't be called the Gay Olympics. So they're called the Gay Games. And when I saw this ad, I said, well, I do a lot of cycling, and I was with Orwell Wheelers, which is one of the leading cycling clubs in Ireland. And I said, well, it'd be great to go, even just to support the team. And suddenly I found myself on an organising committee for Team Ireland.
As you do.
As you do, yes. Yeah. I've never met a committee I didn't like. So I signed up to the committee, signed up to the team, started organising things. We had an amazing reception in the Oris with the amazing president that we have, despite the fact that he's controversial at the moment, but We leave that.
Yeah.
And we ended up, there were 140 of us going to the Gay Games in 2018 in
There were
Paris.
some swimmers, I believe, in that, wasn't
There
there?
were indeed. I don't know if you know, because he is an open water swimmer as well, Roland Temple.
I was about to say, I know him very well.
Aha! Aha!
Hence the interest being spiked. But
Yes.
I know
Yeah.
Ron from open water from Liffey swims and Dunleavy
Yes.
Harbour
Yes.
swims, and very, very accomplished swimmer.
He's
Um,
amazing. Yeah. His
yeah,
medal collection is an awful lot bigger than mine.
yeah, he is a powerhouse. Yeah.
He is a powerhouse. Yes. Yes. He's quite amazing. But basically, anyway, we participated in about 13 sports, 100, all 140 of us. We won something like 40 or 50 medals. I was lucky enough to win a silver and two silver and a bronze, um, in various cycling disciplines. And I had the time of my life. Standing on the podium with
Fantastic.
the Irish flag around me was one of the many highlights of my life. Just an amazing experience.
Yeah, it sounds, and um, is so just from a curiosity, is the
Hmm.
gay game itself, is that to happen again? Has it happened since that one?
No, it hasn't. It was supposed to be in Hong Kong this year
But
in
because of
November. Yeah, but because of COVID and everything else, they're having it, as far as I know, they've postponed it till next year. There's a
mm,
political situation in Hong Kong as well, which is not the best. So they've postponed it till next year, and it's going to be a dual site. One of the sites is Guadalajara in Mexico. I can't remember where the other one is, but again, there'll be a team from Ireland attending. I may or may not go. I'm not sure at this point in time. But it's an amazing experience. And out of the experience of the World Gay Games in 2018, we set up Sporting Pride,
mm,
which is Ireland's national LGBTQI sports organisation.
mm.
And it's gone from strength to strength. I was one of the founding members, and I stayed on the committee, on the board, for a couple of years, and then just life became just too busy for me, and I was finishing off the book, and I was in a lot of other organizations as well at that time. So I just felt that there were people in Sporting Pride who could take it to the next level. And although I could have done that, I didn't feel that I had the time to do it properly. So it's
Great.
an amazing organization, sportingpride.ie, and go to the website and have a look if you've
Yeah.
any interest at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, I said I'm an open water swimming coach, and I also coach water polo. I
Oh,
actually played with a gay water polo team in London once.
hmm.
That was quite fun. Equally as physical as we are and combative. So if you're looking for coaches, you never know. But listen, we're getting close to Q&A. But my last little question, I just wanted to look at. We've talked a lot about acceptance and challenging, and who you are and how you fit in and embrace those around you and educating others in your community. And wanted to maybe finish with, how do you see humanism within your journey, and perhaps parallels between the LGBTQI community and our own humanist community, and your just experience of that?
Well, to be honest, um, the ideals and the ethos of humanism coincides exactly with my ethos. Um, I mean, you treat people the way you want to be treated yourself. You accept and you include. You don't exclude people. Um, so I very much do see humanism as a part of me. Um, I can occasionally dip into other religions for various reasons, to get some wisdom, or to get um, to basically find, because I have a very curious mind. I go into um, I go into, say, Buddhism, or I go into even the Jewish, and it's, I don't feel that I should exclude anything, so I'm willing to accept uh, beliefs or interests from other sources. But certainly humanism would be the base of my belief system and my ethos, accepting everybody for who they are, and the commonalities there between humanism and the LGBTQI community are obvious. There is inclusion, there is diversity, there is acceptance in an ideal world. Now, of course, and I'm sure even within humanism, there's arguments and disagreements, as there is in the LGBTQ community. But there's a lot of commonality, definitely.
Yeah, I certainly would concur on that. Catherine, hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, thanks.
Right. So listen, I'm just going to say thank you from here, but we'll do that also at the end. But to everybody, and Philippa, Catherine, say hello. And I
Thank
believe
you, Philippa.
you're gonna look at
Thanks,
the
Catherine.
any of the questions that have come in. So please go ahead.
Yeah. So I've opened up the floor to everybody. Obviously conscious that we are recording this session. So if people want to pop a question into the chat, I'll happily read it out anonymously. Or if you want to raise your hand and unmute yourself, you can ask the question directly to Philippa. It was very insightful into your memoirs and your life. I was delighted to be part of this discussion.
Thanks, Kat.
No problem at all.
So I have one question that has come in from Barbara, and what does Philippa think of the objections that have been expressed in various quarters to trans women in female sport?
Basically, we look for acceptance. I can understand the issues around. It depends very much. It's a thorny subject. It depends very much. There are the Olympic guidelines. If we're talking about trans women in sport, there are the Olympic guidelines which indicate that you need to have a certain levels of hormones to be able to compete professionally. So by adhering to those guidelines, trans women don't have a perceptible advantage. When it comes down to it, we want inclusion. Trans women want inclusion. They want to be accepted for who they are. We know who we are. Do we have a physical advantage? There needs to be more research. After you've been on hormones for a period of time, the advantage is minuscule, if not nothing.
Yeah.
So it comes down to human rights as well, and it's a case of trying to basically accept everybody for who they are, not give an unfair advantage, and just we'll work it out. It's not a new thing. Trans people have been around for thousands of years. There's recorded trans women in the likes of Egyptian mythology history and Greek history. We've been around a long time. I will say that we're awkward. I know we don't fit into a box, and I'm very glad we don't fit into a box, because we're more interesting because of that. So I won't say there aren't problems around trans women in sport, but it's something that we'll have to work out. And the more research that's done, I'm pretty confident that when I competed at the World Gay Games, I was in the women's group. I know I didn't have an advantage because a Cork woman beat me by about 10 miles in the in the cycling. And indeed, if there hadn't been a couple of accidents, I know a couple of American women would have beaten me as well. And these were cis women who had just trained. I had trained for 6 months before the World Gay Games, and it paid off.
Yeah.
So
Really?
thank you for the question. It's not something that I can answer here and now. It's a very, very complex question.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Philippa. Derek, I think you have a question there. If you want, you can go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Philippa. That was thank you for your talk. That was quite enlightening.
Thank you, Derek.
I'm just going to say I'm more or less the same age as you, and so
you're 21 as well.
I am 21 plus that, and so my parents left in the 50s, so I was brought up in quite a strict Catholic household, and I'm now totally collapsed. So I was really curious about the relationship with your mom, and wanted to know whether the difficulty and the challenges that she found, was it a sense of her failing as a mother in herself, or was it her Catholicism, or was it a combination? If you wouldn't mind, I'm just curious, really, if you would go into a bit more detail.
Of course, Derek. You hit it on the nail there. It was more that she felt that she had failed. And that's society's problem. Society made her think that way. I know she didn't fail as a mother. I know that she gave me all the love and respect and understanding that she possibly could. But she couldn't understand that the core of my being was me being a woman. And she saw it just as she was shamed by her view of society and the way society would look at me if it came out, say to the neighbors. I mean, you know, the Irish way of saying things. Oh my God, think of the neighbors. We had to keep our voices quiet, you know, low in the kitchen in case the neighbors heard. I mean, what were we talking about? We were talking about what we were going to have for dinner that night. Who cares, you know? But the relationship that I had with her leading up to the point that I told her was changed immeasurably afterwards. And it was entirely that she felt shame, she felt that she'd failed, she felt worried for both me and for herself and how her friends and family would look on her. So it was just the society, as she brought me up, wasn't ready to accept difference, to accept diversity, to accept me.
But that's it's I suppose because I remember those times as well, albeit in England, and yeah, they were different and they were less accepting than they are now. So I can imagine the challenges for her. My dad in particular would have sort of said, I'd have had talk with him about raising me, and he said, you forget we were brought up by Victorian parents. So, you know, we're one step away, our parents were one steps away from Victorian people. So that morality and standard just passed along. So, yeah, it would have been tough and challenging for you. So thank you for sharing.
Yes. And don't forget it. I mean, Ireland was a different situation to England even, which was more liberal than Ireland. We had the Catholic Church looking over our shoulders at everything we did. So that made it even more difficult. Not that my mother was particularly religious, but we did go to Mass every Sunday. And when I started not going to Mass at age 13 or 14, it raised a few eyebrows, let's say.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Patrick.
Joe.
Sorry, Patrick, you have a question there as well.
Hi, hi, Philippa. Lovely to see you. And I have to say, you put a lovely voice and a personality to the whole topic of transgender, something which I'm sure an awful lot of people, if they only admit it, know very little about.
Thank you, Patrick.
Can I just ask, I've missed the actual program myself. You know of the debate and the controversy around the Joe Duffy thing. I didn't hear it, but I've been looking at it in the press. And it seems to have taken off. And now you have the situation where I think Dublin Pride have stepped back from, conversing, if you like, with RT. Can you just give us a little bit of a perspective on what all of that is about?
Well, basically, my understanding is that the Live Line program with Joe Duffy started last Thursday, and it was around a particular event. It was the AGM of the National Women's Council that a good friend of mine, a transgender woman, was re-elected to the board of the National Women's Council. And to cut a long story short, basically Joe Duffy gave a platform to imported transphobes, people who perhaps came from England, or rang in from England, or were influenced, Irish people here, influenced by the radical right and people from the US, the far right, basically people who are looking to cause trouble. And they were given a platform by Joe Duffy on Thursday. That in itself was bad enough. Now, there were a couple of people allowed on to give the counter view, the inclusive LGBTQ view of things. We are a fairly united community, and generally the trans people are accepted within LGBTQ. However, that was Thursday. Then Joe had it again on Friday, and he had it on Monday, and he had it on Tuesday. And last night we had a board meeting where we decided that basically we could not stand back any further and let our community be torn apart by this, because you may think it's only a radio program, but people listening to that radio program are going to feel that their mental health is going to be affected. They are going to be depressed, and even me, and I consider myself very, very strong and very capable of standing up to bullies and negativity and so on. But it affects everybody's mental health. To give you a scary statistic, 75% of trans people contemplate suicide. 40% actually attempt it. And those statistics are going to be exacerbated by programs like that. It wasn't a balanced program. And to talk about trans people and their right to exist, and some of the people on that program were talking about how they wished trans people didn't exist because we're too awkward for them. We're too difficult for them to accept. And it was all done under the guise of women's rights. Now, my bio says that I am a passionate feminist, and I am. I spent, I don't know how many nights out canvassing for Repeal the 8th. I've been to so many women's protests. I am an incredibly inclusive, passionate feminist. I'm not taking any rights away from women by being myself. Rights are not something that have to be divided up. Everybody can have rights and nobody loses. So that's why the Joe Duffy program was so horrendous. And it's why Dublin Pride pulled the partnership that we had with them. And it's caused ramifications. RT are going to be called up before the media committee in the Dáil, and there'll be various other things happening which I'm not at liberty to talk about in the coming days. So watch this space, so to speak. But thank you for the question, Patrick, because it was certainly something that caused us a lot of upset and worry. What happens after a program like that is people become emboldened and they realize that the community is there to be attacked, and that can be physical or verbal. So anything that happens over the next couple of weeks until the Pride Parade is on Joe Duffy's head.
Yeah.
That's my rant over.
No, thank you, Philip. That was something that we needed to hear. I certainly needed to hear the perspective, because first of all, I hadn't heard the program, but I was trying to pick up on what was happening, because it is being covered in the press and social media and so forth. And so thank you for that, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Patrick.
Dara, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yep, go for it.
Yeah. Philippa, lovely to hear you. Just to mention that I met Philippa first, Philippa and Helen in, I think, 2016, when Catherine Sapone was running for Dublin Southwest. And Philippa and Helen were canvassing, and so were Mary and I. And Helen is a radiographer, and Mary, my wife, in fact, she was retired at that stage, is a retired radiographer. We had that in common. But Philip, I never said it to you, but at the very start, the first time we met, I did not realize you were a trans person. I thought that you and Helen were an ordinary gay couple, and Catherine had lots of gay people on her team. And by the second time we met, that the penny dropped for me. You're actually trans, which was wonderful. But also in your book, which I really enjoyed, you give a huge amount of credit to Helen for her role in your transition. And really, she was indispensable. If she had not been as open and willing and loving as she was, it couldn't have happened the way it did.
No.
Isn't that true?
That is absolutely true, Dara. And thank you for that. I remember the realization on you when I essentially came out as trans. They were amazing times, but yes, absolutely. Helen was wonderful. Her ears are probably burning in the other room now. She's heard me talk too much, so she's probably not listening to this. But I will praise her endlessly. She is if I can use a religious notation, she is a saint.
Anybody else would like to say hello? Any questions? I see Barry O'Mahony is there. Barry, would you like to say hi this evening?
Yeah, definitely. Hello. And I mean, I don't really want to kind of jump in and talk things. I've only just arrived. I've just been busy here at home, but no, and definitely. Hi, Philip. I'm Barry.
Hi, Barry.
It's just something that I think if you've been on social media recently, and you follow people either of like mind or people with different opinions, that you want to learn about why people have different opinions, you really see how, you were mentioning Liveline, just how somebody's viewpoint will be presented as very mainstream, and it's really just to get on to the radio or to get an interview on TV or whatever it is, and all of a sudden you're listening to the stuff that was. I mean, I heard day one. No, I heard day two, and it was started off about a football club in on the north side. I can't remember, but yeah, quickly then the calls started coming in, and I didn't stick around long enough, really. You kind of feel dirty listening to it.
Absolutely.
I mean, I kind of wish I had kind of listened to it a bit more, because it really is. It's an education to see how people just latch on to something that, oh, this is kind of mainstream. I'll get on people's sides, and then in we go, and it's like the edge of a little crowbar, and you just keep niggling away, and it's just such a dangerous tool, because it's hard not to let people on the radio show and something like Liveline, especially. They really need to sort out the vetting and to find out who's calling, and to see if there's a background of people as well. I think the vetting is I don't know how they do it there. I'd say I'd imagine you'd draw a short straw to work on the show to kind of deal with everything. But but certainly it was very apparent as to how something like that, just the hate that was able to make it onto mainstream. And I really hope a lot of people who've haven't got first-hand experience or know somebody who's going through this and understands that just because they're not affected, it's really is out there. We have to speak. We have to stand with you and all trans people, because
thank you, Barry.
We're all, well, no, not at all. I mean, we're all we're all different, but there seems to be this normative way of being that is the kind of, anything different from that is being just being criticized, and I mean it's kind of gone backwards, and I really feel first of all I'd love I mean, I'm sure there's some kind of an alternative pride that doesn't have the pink washing going on. I'd love there to be, because I know like originally it was a protest.
That's right.
About a very very unsavory murder, to say the least. But I do hope something is on that a lot of people can go along and show their support for. Because,
thank you very much, Barry.
Not at all. Apart from everything else that the rest of us suffer, with bills and all the rest of it, that's so much else. So much else to go through as well on top of that. So, I really hope you've heard some support today.
Thank you very much, Barry. And indeed, allyship is something that I talk about a lot, and how important it is to help the LGBTQ, and particularly today the trans community. But if I may end on a very positive note, I just received a couple of emails from the Dublin Pride CEO about the reaction of the public to the Joe Duffy Liveline specials, and literally the emails and messages of support have been flying in from all quarters, other media as well. So it does look like it could almost be a watershed moment, in that it went too far. The Joe Duffy programs went too far and have turned. I think we had lots of support in the country, as witnessed by, say, the Marriage Equality, which was 62% in favour. There was lots of support there. Trans is a little bit more difficult to accept and to understand, but I think this moment in time may be a watershed. So I just hope that is the case. Michael, I unfortunately have a Pride meeting in 5 minutes' time. So if anybody else has any last minute questions or anything else?
Yeah, so I just, I think reiterate what Barry said, and everybody here. There's just a few little comments. We have Patricia Riley, just no particular question, but just a huge thank you. It's been a real pleasure to hear about you and your journey. And you're so right about your mum. It's society's fault that she felt shame, and neither she nor you have a single thing to be ashamed of. Congratulations. I look forward to reading the book. And then we've also had another comment in. I want to thank Philippa for her courage in sharing her story. What we found as a society through the marriage referendum is that people's minds change when they have an actual face, an actual person, and not gay this and trans that. we make it personal about people, things change. And so clearly lots of support from everybody. And I think that's a general sense of this evening. And that was from Mike Hackett. So there's nothing else from me except thank you.
Sorry, Michael, there's just another comment on this side. Just someone's made the effort to put it in, so I'll just mention it. Eilish has just said thank you for that clarity, Philippa, and thank you also for your temperate and judicious, non-judgmental delivery and message. Your courage is something for us all to take note of.
Thank you very much.
That kind of echoes many people's sentiment.
Thank you.
And Philippa, if there's anything you want to reach out to us on, I know Gillian, our CEO, is on this evening. If there's any way we can support this topic and clearly be an ally, and somebody to sound some thoughts on. If you want to send some links or where we can be of support, please do afterwards, and I'll share it with our community.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you everybody for attending. It's been a pleasure talking to you all, and hopefully I've made the subject of being trans more accessible and understandable. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody for joining, and to Catherine to co-host, and for everybody for attending this evening. And to find out more about humanism, as I said, humanism.ie.